Yep. And then let's go back here and get back in here. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Anne-Marie Doyle. I'm the Community Education Manager here at the Les Turner ALS Foundation. Welcome to our July ALS Learning Series on Inclusion, Support, and Education, ALS Clinical Research. Before we get started, I just want to remind you all that you are muted and off camera. So sit back, relax. The presentation should take about an hour. We will leave time for a Q&A at the end. Which brings me to my next point. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them into the Q&A. I believe chat is disabled, so Q&A is going to be the best place to drop that information. If at any point you need to run because life happens and things pop up, or you know that somebody who wanted to come but was unable to make it, it is being recorded. And this should be on our website within the next day or two, and also on our YouTube channel. All right, before we get started, I just want to thank our industry and generous donors from the Gilbert and Jacqueline Fern Foundation and Mitsubishi Tanaba Pharma America. Without their support, we wouldn't be able to do this. If you are looking for information on ALS, whether you need support on making a decision, want to learn more about certain topics, or just want to browse our past library, please feel free to visit us at lesturnерals.org. And we also have our Les Turner ALS Symposium on ALS. Please save the date. That will be Monday, November 4th, 2024. We have both virtual and in-person options. Again, you can visit us at lesturnерals.org/symposium, or I will hover just a little bit longer and talk a little bit slower if you want to scan that QR code. Okay, and then last but not least, if you are interested in joining the National ALS Registry, feel free to learn more at cdc.gov/ALS. You can learn how your participation in the registry can really make a difference. All right, now that all that housekeeping is out of the way, I want to introduce you all to two of my most favorite people in the ALS space. Allison, since losing her husband in 2016, has committed her time and energy to helping others impacted by ALS. She is currently the strategic advisor of communication engagement for the Sean M. Healey and AMG Center for ALS at MGH and NEALS, and is the co-chair of the NEALS Patient Education and Advocacy Committee and the NEALS Information and Community Education Working Group. And then there's Judi. Judi has 17 years of nursing experience and an additional 7 years in her current role as Research Access Nurse Manager at the Sean M. Healey and AMG Center for ALS at MGH, where she communicates with people living with ALS about research opportunities, explains specific trials, helps navigate the enrollment process, and collaborates with others to build awareness around clinical research in ALS. Thank you, Judi. Thank you, Allison. And I will throw it on over to you.
Oh, great. Thank you so much, Anne-Marie, for this wonderful invitation. Allison and I are so happy to be here today. Allison in Arizona, myself in Boston. And we look forward to sharing numerous research resources, as well as information and community support that's available to people as they think about whether research is right for them and what avenue of research they want to get involved with, because everybody's data is so important to helping us find answers. We want to make sure that you're all welcome, that there's ways for you to get involved in research. So could you turn to the next slide, please? Thank you. So Anne-Marie just explained my role at Mass General, and I wanted to just say that I've been in this role for a little over 7 years. And it's kind of an interesting way that I am the only person that's been a research access nurse at the Healey Center. And the way the position came to be is that people were coming to clinic to see their team and get, support for their different symptoms. And the nurses were helping them connect with physical therapy and speech and respiratory therapy. As well, patients were asking them about trials. So the same nurses were finding themselves talking to people about clinical help and support, and then flipping a switch and actually going into great detail to talk about specific trials. And this was all happening during a clinic visit. The doctors were also finding themselves in the same position because everybody wanted to ask about research. We have 900 patients, by the way, at Mass General. So this role was created to answer that need. And so how I spend my days is not unsimilar to what we're doing right now, except with a smaller group. Usually with an individual who has ALS in their family. Via Zoom, I'll have general research talks so I can explain the landscape of research in ALS, answer any types of questions. There is no dumb question when you're talking about ALS research. I also talk about the specific trials that are enrolling at Mass General, and I do my best to explain those in plain language, which means I have to understand the science enough to then turn around and explain it to folks in terms that all of us understand. Some of my favorite conversations are with people who've reached out from near and far, and there's hundreds of people who have reached out from across the country, even around the world. I've been in email conversations with them and had Zoom conversations with them, and sometimes they just want to know where to begin. And so I'm always happy to engage in those types of communications. And I think the most important reasons why I like to do this is because it is my belief that everybody who lives with this disease should know that research is happening on their behalf. Because research is where the hope is. And it's the only way forward for us to get more and more answers. So again, I think it's so important that everybody just knows about research. Whether they choose to get involved is a very personal reason, and Allison and I will talk to you about ways to get engaged. Next slide, please. So this is actually a handout. Allison and I did a road trip in the spring. We're not going to talk about that today, other than to say that we created handouts that we thought would be helpful to people in the community. When we were on our listening tour, we were talking to people in the community, both healthcare providers and patients, to kind of learn what they knew about research. And so we created this particular handout. This is probably the quickest one that we created together. And I call it the pillars of ALS care. So first and foremost, you want to, align yourself with a medical professional who knows ALS. Then you want to align yourself with other medical professionals who can help you with your symptoms for physical therapy, nutrition, speech. You also want to talk to your provider about getting on the approved ALS medications that are available. There's 2 Rs, Riluzole and Radicava at this point, that are approved for the treatment of ALS, and then Nuedexta is approved for a symptom of ALS. Then there's community support, both your own community, your family and loved ones, as well as the community organizations that are available to help you with home modifications, ramps, wheelchairs, things like that. Where we're going to focus today is the ALS Clinical Research, which during my time as research access nurse, I have seen this as an emerging pillar of care. In other words, more and more people want to know about research, and they consider it part of their care to understand what's going on in trials. Next slide, please. So we're going to talk about what is clinical research and why it is so important. Next slide, please, Anne-Marie. So in a nutshell, if you have a cell phone, you can participate in research. So there's 4 categories of research: observational or biomarker studies, which is collection of blood or spinal fluid, completion of surveys or questionnaires. There is no direct benefit from observational studies, but they are hugely beneficial to science, because the scientists are observing people living with ALS, answering questions or collecting their blood, and then they're analyzing that to see if there's any commonalities or if there's any ways that we can diagnose people sooner. So observational studies, and Allison, I know, loves this, are really important in research. Then there's the clinical trials, and I think this is everybody's favorite category. It's an interventional trial of an investigational product. It can be a device, it could be exercise, it could be a diet, or it could be an investigational medication, which is everybody's favorite. And so when you're in a clinical trial, you're definitely under a microscope, because the scientists are trying to learn if this product, diet, investigational medication is helpful to people living with ALS. There's oftentimes placebo, and hopefully it'll be beneficial to the people who are involved, not harmful. There may be an open label extension, which means after the trial's over, those participants may be able to continue to get the study drug or product for a certain length of time. Then there's expanded access. Now, expanded access is also for people who are not eligible for clinical trials. They may have had their ALS too long. They may just not be able to enroll in a clinical trial at this time. So this is also the opportunity for people to try an investigational product, again, a medication or a diet that may be helpful to them. There's fewer criteria in expanded access and fewer visits, no placebo. And it may have, again, direct benefit to the participants, hopefully. There are definitely more spots in expanded access right now, but there's still not enough spots for everybody who reaches out, but there are so many more spots at this point in time. And then the last of the clinical research categories is the end-of-life tissue donations, which is just an incredibly selfless way to contribute to science by donating tissue from one's brain or spinal cord after passing away. And the science that is learned from this incredible donation to help with, maybe diagnosing again ALS sooner or finding new therapies. End of life tissue donation is an incredible gift to ALS science. The other part of this slide that I want to talk about is, why is ALS clinical research so important? At this point in time, research done on human volunteers is really the only pathway forward for us to get answers to so many questions about ALS. We can't duplicate this in a petri dish yet. So the questions might be, how can ALS be diagnosed sooner, or what causes ALS? Can the progression of symptoms be slowed down? Could they be reversed? And then one day, could they be cured? So ALS clinical research is super important for everybody, whether folks get involved or not. It's just super important to know that it is happening. Next slide, please. So we're going to talk about the phases of clinical trials, which again is the investigational medications or products, and then what happens in each of these phases. Next slide, Anne-Marie. So we have phase 1 through 4. So phase 1 includes a few number of people, and this is the phase that tests safety and tolerability. It also starts to look at the dosing to get to the right dose that is effective. So this is a small, often short trial. Phase 2's still looking at safety and tolerability, hopefully fine-tuning that dose if it didn't happen in phase 1, and also figuring out if the drug is biologically speaking going to the part of the body that it was supposed to go and do what it was supposed to do. Everyone's favorite phase is phase 3, because this is the efficacy phase. And this is a trial that many more people can participate in. Still looking at safety and tolerability, but also looking to see if the investigational product is effective at doing whatever it said it would do in the protocol. Generally speaking, for ALS trials right now, they're looking to slow progression. And then the phase 4 happens after FDA approval of a product, an investigational product, and it's studying the long-term effects of safety and tolerability, and also to see if there's any adverse effects of the product long-term. Next slide. Oh, before we go, sorry. I just wanted to add that each phase is so important. They build on the science, so that's why they're important to do. I often hear from people I speak to that it's so frustrating that research takes such a long time. And while I don't live with ALS, I definitely empathize with that thought. Why not? Why can't I just try that drug? I'm going to die anyways, is sometimes what I hear people say. And I'm always listening, and I always want to be respectful of where people are coming from. And all I can say is the scientists have to practice science responsibly. Research, they have to do it responsibly. They have to follow the protocol. They have to run a good trial so that the data that comes out on the other end is clean, and we can analyze it to see if we do have anything helpful. So that's why research does take some time to get to the answers for everybody. Next slide, sorry. So how do I decide if clinical research is right for me? Next slide, Anne-Marie. So first, there is no right or wrong answer to this. This is a very personal decision, and you can change your mind at any time. But it's best made with input from those who you trust. So discussing research with your ALS care provider, who you've entrusted your care with, is a good place to start, or with family members who are engaged in research or help you with looking into research. You want to consider how much of a time commitment, how much energy, how much travel you want to do to participate in a trial, because it also affects not only you, but your loved ones. Then you want to use some reliable research resources, say that 3 times fast, which we will share with you, to find trials or studies that are of interest to you. And then you want to connect with the research team about the trials that you uncovered to learn the specifics about the trial and to understand the expectations of each participant. Then when you have all that information, it's never a bad idea not to review again with your ALS care provider what you learned and what you're thinking, so that they can weigh in. This may be a news flash. People often ask me if I can select a trial for them, and I am not able to do that. I don't have the knowledge base to do that, or the education background to do that. I even think that providers, while they can like the science of certain trials, and that might be what they share with you, they don't even know which ones are maybe going to be the ones that are helpful to people living with ALS. But they are definitely more educated in the ALS to help you kind of narrow things down. And then it's up to you to decide if clinical research is right for you. And then we'll talk a little bit further about the types of research that you can get engaged with. It could be observational studies or drug trials. But again, you can always change your mind at any time. Okay, next slide, please. So what community resources are available to learn more about current clinical research? Next slide again, Anne-Marie. So here we are, Allison and I. Allison is very involved and engages all the time with the patient community and the science community. And so she is able to bring that communication skill and connect people who want to learn more about research with the right people they can learn it from the reliable scientists. Christina at NEALS is helpful if you are interested in looking at a few specific trials. She can actually search for you on the NEALS website based on some criteria that you give to her, and she can give you a list of trials, observational studies, and drug trials that are available that you can explore further. I talked about what I do, and mostly I do focus my attention on Mass General, but I've talked to hundreds of people about specific trials, either enrolling at Mass General. I'm well versed in the platform trial, and I'm well versed in EAPs, so I'm always open to having a conversation with anybody about what's going on in research. And then Catherine Small, she is our platform trial patient navigator. If any of you have attended webinars, you may have seen Catherine and Allison on those webinars. Next slide, please. So just talking a little bit more about how Catherine helps people with the Healey ALS platform trial, which I'll just give you a snippet of what the platform trial is. But Catherine's role is to really connect with the patients and the research centers that are enrolling in the trial, and help people get connected to sites if they're interested in the trial and want to learn more. She also organizes our platform trial webinars and writes a tremendous number of patient-facing handouts for the platform trial. She is very willing to work with people one-on-one if you need that extra help to learn more about the trial and get connected to a site. Next slide, please. So here is a QR code for the platform trial webinars, which Catherine is responsible for coordinating and inviting guests. They have been in place since December of 2020, which is so impressive. Usually it's Dr. Sabrina Paganoni, but oftentimes we have guests, maybe doctors or nurses or research coordinators from other centers across the country who are also enrolling in the platform trial. It's currently on a monthly basis available the fourth Thursday of the month, 5 o'clock Eastern time. The second Thursday of the month, there is a webinar that's dedicated to updates on EAPs. So you're welcome, even if you're not involved in this trial. It's really a good trial to follow along with. So please feel free to join us. Next slide, please. Here's some of the beautiful handouts, digital handouts that Catherine has helped create. She works with the pharmaceutical companies to create individualized handouts with QR codes that connect you to listen to science webinars about their product. We have a beautiful handout about biomarkers. So when you are giving your blood or spinal fluid, why are you giving your blood or spinal fluid? In this brochure on the far right will help explain that to you. Next slide, please. There also was a need to do a specialized lumbar puncture brochure because one of the regimens or study drugs in the platform trial required a lumbar puncture or a couple of lumbar punctures. So Catherine worked with Dr. Latta at Barrows to create not only a patient-facing handout, but also a short video to explain to people what's involved in a lumbar puncture to help maybe alleviate the fear that people have surrounding having those done. Just to give you an idea, I keep talking about the platform trial, but real quick, it is a trial that started in July of 2020, so during the height of COVID. We have now 70 research centers who are helping to enroll in the platform trial. We've put through 1,300 participants, so all the patients who are also our partners that have gone through the trial. We've tested 7 drugs, shared results on 5, and the goal of the platform trial, it's perpetual, so we're going to keep it open and keep testing drugs, but the goal is to get to answers quicker than a typical clinical trial. Next slide, please. Here's just one slide about expanded access, which I had explained previously. But if you can come to the webinar the second Thursday of the month at 5 o'clock Eastern time, or if you go to our website, which this is one of the pages on our website, we've answered frequently asked questions. Catherine, Allison, and I wrote the frequently asked questions based on the types of emails and phone calls we receive about expanded access. We also connect you to science webinars for each of the study drugs that's now in an expanded access program, and connect you to clinicaltrials.gov, which is where you can find a listing of the different centers that are engaged in the various expanded access programs. Next slide, please. So what online resources are available to learn more about a specific trial or study? So we're going to share with you, so clinicaltrials.gov. It's pretty straightforward. It is searchable, gives you a lot of good information, not very colorful, but this is my go-to for sure. Next slide. NEALS just recently updated their search engine. And so as you can see, there's different categories that you can search on. And this is a really nice tool too. Christina would use this to search for trials for you. Next slide. The ALS Trial Navigator, which was designed by Dr. Nadia Sethi at ALS TDI, is a really nice new tool where you can actually put in some data about yourself and save it and search on trials, expanded access, observational studies, things like that. And I don't know if I have one more slide on. Yes, great. Thanks, Allison. So this is the IMALS dashboard, and it's very colorful and also searchable, and another go-to tool to search for trials. So there may be other resources out there, like each research center most likely has their own website with trials listed, but these are the four that Allison and I thought we'd share today. I do want to spend 1 minute on tips and tricks for searching for information on any of these. So most of the contact information and the trial status stems from what's on clinicaltrials.gov for any of these search engines. So if that's not up to date, then you might find a few problems with getting contact information for the different sites. So here's some tips from me. Sometimes the contact information is listed right on clinical trials for the individual sites, emails and phone numbers. So start there and sending emails or phone numbers to those sites and give them some time to respond back to you. If they don't respond back to you, also on clinicaltrials.gov is usually contact information for the pharma company. So that would be the next step, is I would reach out to the pharma company, express your interest in participating in trial X so that they can help you connect to the sites. Sometimes on clinicaltrials.gov, it will say something like Boston, Mass. 02114, and it won't give you a site. But if you can surmise which site that is, that's us. You can go to our website or the website of Emory or another center that's doing research, and you can actually find contact information on that website for ALS, whether it's for clinic or research, so that you can find an inroad to making a connection with somebody. The folks at the research centers, they don't have dedicated people to talk about research. They're doing trials and running study visits. So it may take them a little bit, but keep trying to make connection. And hopefully any one of those 3 steps. If not, the last thing I would maybe try is the pharmaceutical company usually has a website with their contact information on the website, and I would go there and grab that contact information and start there. Allison can attest to the fact that even the pharmaceutical companies don't reach back out to me, and it takes me a little bit of time for me to hear back from them. So I'm going to hand this all over to Allison, and she's going to talk about many other ways to get involved in research, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Judi, for covering all those topics. Next slide, Anne-Marie, please. So as Judi mentioned, participating in an actual study or trial is a really personal decision. but there are a ton of other ways that you can participate in clinical research and be involved in the clinical research process and contribute to that without actually being a participant in a study. So the first thing I want to talk about is NEALS, the Northeast ALS Consortium. And I want to share with you a little bit about what that is and how you can be involved if you're somebody with lived experience. Next slide, please. So NEALS is a large consortium of members, and those members are actually academic research centers who perform clinical trials and research in ALS. So I want to make that distinction because what makes NEALS a little bit different than a lot of other organizations in the ALS space is that it is not an actual organization that's run by a few people who make decisions. It's actually a membership consortium of research centers. So it is the scientific community for mainly North America, but also globally. And it does have a very experienced and seasoned executive leadership team. Currently, the co-chairs are Dr. James Berry from MGH and Dr. Jinsey Andrews from Columbia University. And the NEALS program director is Carly Allen, who has tons of experience in the clinical research area, and our associate program director, Beverly Smits, does as well. So it is a consortium that you wouldn't see advocating for any one trial, but rather the members or those sites could do that, but the consortium itself is really dedicated to education and research in ALS. And they do that not only through their sites, but they offer scientific advisory boards where they offer support and information to companies coming into the ALS research space or who are in the ALS research space and really need some help to make their trial meet the regulatory requirements or anything of that sort. And in addition, as Judi alluded to, trials take a long time to get through. And one way that NEALS helps with that is through its coordinating centers to provide some of those exterior components like review boards, ethics reviews, infrastructure concerns, pharmacy, all those different things that this NEALS consortium can provide expertise quickly and get trials up and running quickly, as well as they do have a biorepository of all those fluids that are collected so that they can be used for research going forward. Next slide, please. So what is the mission of NEALS? Well, it's really simple. They want to accelerate the development of new treatments through innovative research and working with people impacted by ALS. And they do this with the highest level of integrity by being transparent, including people with lived experience in everything that's done, by really enforcing excellence and peer review among scientists and a democratic governance process, because they understand that even though they're all scientists, even scientists sometimes interpret science a little differently, and all of those perspectives are necessary to move things forward and eventually, hopefully as quickly as possible, find the treatments and cures that we're all looking for. Next slide, please. And so how do they do this in a consortium? Well, they have lots of committees, and if you'll look, you'll see they have Bulbar Committee, Technology, Research Nurses, such as Judi. But one area that we can advocate and can include lived experience is the Patient Education and Advocacy Committee, or the PEACE Committee. So follow that orange arrow, and I'll share a little bit about how if you're somebody with lived experience, you can get involved within the science community through the PEACE Committee. Next slide, please. So along with committees, NEALS has two leadership working groups. One is dedicated to growing clinical research globally. The other is, as you might have heard talked about, the NICE working group, NEALS Information and Community Education. And these people were appointed by the NEALS leadership team to serve as a resource for the community on all things clinical research. So you'll see that great group of people, all clinicians, scientists, researchers, and they support the NEALS membership if the membership needs support or issues, but they also support the full ALS community. So they will take the issues that are really relevant to the community about clinical research and work hard to answer those through education, through webinars, through publications. Recently have partnered with ALS One on a publication review program, wherein the most critical subjects are identified. The NICE working group will identify current publications about that subject, and ALS One will pull together the authors and people from the community and the NEALS NICE working group and the NEALS Patient Advisory Committee, which I'll share with you about in just a moment. And they record a question and answer session, which then the big finale to those would be a live webinar through NEALS hosted by the NICE working group, where that critical subject to the patient community is discussed with a Q&A at the end. So this group does a lot of work to work with everybody in the organization to provide the most current information and education on clinical research. Next slide, please. And in addition to that, there's a lot happening in clinical research today. NEALS alone has trained over 3,000 members with 80 NEALS affiliated trials, 50 of them interventional, so actually have a therapy. We do a ton of webinars, and there's a focus on growing and continuing to expand those clinical research sites so that access can be expanded to as many people as possible. But the way that people with lived experience can participate in all of these efforts is through the Research Ambassador Clinical Research Learning Institute program. Follow the orange arrow there. That's what I'll share with you. So the next slide, please, Anne-Marie. The ALS Clinical Research Learning Institute is actually a 2-day program that really focuses on the basics of clinical research for people impacted by ALS. So those could be people biologically impacted, caregivers, survivors, surviving family members, support people. And we come together either in person or virtually and talk about those things like, what is clinical research? How do statistics impact clinical research? What does the pipeline currently look like? What are the ethics behind clinical research? And then you become part of this group of certified NEALS research ambassadors, and then you participate in these peace committee meetings. As part of that committee, we meet each month and we bring in people from all over in every aspect of clinical research who come and talk about what's going on in their study or their organization and how people with lived experience can be involved. Next slide, please. We do that through something called patient advisory boards. Now, this is kind of a big catch-all category. It might be called a patient advisory committee. In fact, the NEALS group of people with lived experience is called a patient advisory committee. And this is how you get to that point and get to be involved in those scientific discussions. Attend a training class, a Clinical Research Learning Institute training class, become an ALS research ambassador by completing that class, share in the mission of our research ambassadors, which is to support each other, encourage collaborative solutions, and serve the community in a way that promotes kindness, respect, and inclusion. And as a result, you have an opportunity to become a part of many personalized engagements in all kinds of organizations and drug sponsors. And we take that on multiple levels, not just the fact that you have lived experience, but that you have life experience. People impacted by ALS had careers and skills and different things that they can bring into the research community to move the science of ALS forward. Next slide, please. Anne-Marie, next slide, please. Thank you, Ken. Oh, she's getting it. Here we go. So in closing on NEALS, just want to share that there's a lot of information out on the internet, right? There's a lot of good information and there's a lot of misinformation. It's really tough to tell the difference. So if you're looking for information about the science behind clinical research, the NEALS website is a great place for you to go. So they have multiple sections of information, community education, all of the webinars they've done, all of the webinars that are coming up. If you want to search by a keyword or something specific you're looking for, you have the option to do that. There's a whole lot of information for people impacted by ALS, including information about Clinical Research Learning Institute training classes. There is information, as Judi shared, about expanded access and the new Search for a Trial, which is a clean, simple way to simply just look for information. So next slide, please. So separate from NEALS, there's another organization called the International Alliance of ALS and MND Associations. And this was formed back in 1992 to give all of those associations, ALS associations and MND associations around the world, a place to come together and to collaborate and to share information and to utilize each other's resources and provide the best support for each other that they can. And they do that in many areas, mainly focused on clinical research and fundamental rights of all people impacted by ALS. And they do have opportunities for people with lived experience with ALS to participate. Next slide, please. So there are two programs, and their website is right up there. It's called the Pals and Cows Advisory Council, or the PCAC, as they say, and that's their version of a patient advisory board. And this group of people with lived experience comes together and they help the board of directors of the International Alliance with all issues that might come up and give perspective to those. So if that's something you're interested in, you can reach out to them through their website. The other thing they do is what's called a Patient Fellows Program, and that empowers people living with ALS or MND and the people supporting them to bridge that gap and be involved in scientific discussions about clinical research and how clinical research is moving forward. And this program actually is a support program that helps those people to travel to the annual Alliance meeting, the Allied Professionals Forum, which are licensed ALS healthcare providers, and the big International Scientific Symposium that follows. Now, this program, I believe, is filled already for 2024 in Montreal, but if it's something you're interested in doing, I would go out to their website, keep in the know, sign up to get notifications, because rumor has it 2025, these meetings will be held in San Diego at a beautiful hotel on the ocean. So you may want to be involved with that as well. Next slide, please. So I want to go into a couple of community-led programs. ALS Office Hours is a program that's led by members of all different organizations and lived experience and professional experience within the ALS community. Now this little logo says it all. A picture says 1,000 words. This group just wants to provide a safety net to people because it may take a little while sometimes to reach your healthcare provider, or you may have a question that just comes up randomly and you just need an answer very quickly. Next slide, please. So what this group does is every Friday, they open up a Zoom link for an hour, and anybody who wants to can stop by, ask a question, share a thought, ask for a resource, and immediately get an answer to that, hopefully immediately, or we will find out for you. And I just want to say that this is not about like your personal situation or any medical decisions. This is simply a place. Say you read a press release that said mice have been cured of ALS by this one drug, and you're not really sure if that's accurate or not. Hop on Friday and ask the question, and you'll be given answers and resources from people who understand the issues behind there. Next slide, please. Now, this group, After ALS, is a very new group that was formed and very near and dear to my heart, because we know that ALS happens to families, right? And all of the perspectives are really necessary when we talk about clinical research, because to participate in a clinical study or a clinical trial, a lot of times you need the help of a caregiver to do a lot of those things. So those perspectives are super important even after the fact. Next slide, please. So what this group is doing is providing a safe space for people who have lost their loved ones to ALS to share their experiences, to express their emotions, to find support, so that those people understand that what they learned, what they saw, what they participated in, it matters, and their voice is necessary to move clinical research and the science forward. And just a great group that's forming. Their Facebook page is up, as you'll see there. If it's something that you're interested in either attending or actually being part of that team and contributing, so that these people know that their perspective of clinical research is very valid right here, right now. You can reach out on that Facebook page to the admin and they will get back to you as quickly as possible. Next slide, please. The next group is a Veterans Action Group, which was formed under the ALS Hope Foundation, which is run by Dr. Terry Hyman Patterson and Jamie Piggott. This group, next slide, please. I'll share some info about them. So many of our military veterans receive their care at VA hospitals or facilities. And the VA does do clinical research for ALS, but it's sometimes very limited. And our veterans are a very diverse population in and of themselves, and we want them to be able to participate in as much research as possible in the VA and outside of the VA if they so choose. So this group bridges the gap between veterans living with ALS and the ALS scientific research community. And lot of work happening in this area to bring these groups together. If you are a veteran or you have a connection to the veteran community and ALS and you want to participate on this team, or if you just like to talk to them and maybe get some resources and learn some more information, you can reach out to Mandy Bailey. Her email address is on the screen, and I'm sure she would be happy to help you. Next slide, please. This is a very important group, and the legacy also formed under the ALS Hope Foundation. Next slide, please. Is the group of genetic carriers of ALS and FTD under the direction of the executive director, Gene Swidler. This group has moved mountains in changing the conversation of clinical research. Where do we start? When do we start treatments? Let's talk about those asymptomatic carriers and how they contribute to the science. In fact, their website has a search engine for research specifically to the genetic community. I had the opportunity to spend some time with this group in Chicago last month. So energetic, so passionate. If this is something that you relate to and want to be involved in, please reach out through their website. It's a great spot to impact clinical research. Next slide, please. ALS Clinical Trials Facebook page. Okay, social media has a lot of Facebook pages, a lot of tweets, a lot of information. It's really hard to sort through. If you're interested in conversations about clinical research, this is the Facebook page that you want to join. Next slide, please. And the reason that you want to do that is this is dedicated to current research, people's opinions, people's questions, asking information, and all posts are vetted by people with a scientific background to ensure that they're accurate, and many members of the scientific community participate in these conversations. So if you're interested in the science and clinical research on social media, here's a Facebook page for you to participate in. Next slide, please. And the last group I want to talk about is ALS Untangled, which is a partnership with the CREATE Consortium run by Dr. Michael Benatar and Dr. Rick Bedlack. And let's be honest, like in light of the fact that there are limited treatments and no cures for ALS, people impacted by the disease will do their own experimenting and will find ways to research on themselves. And we want to mitigate the risk of doing that. Next slide, please. So ALS Untangled, run by Dr. Rick Bedlack, actually brings together a full group of scientists, researchers, clinicians, and they will review alternative and off-label treatments with the goal of helping people with ALS make more informed decisions about what they want to self-experiment with. Next slide, please. And they do this very scientifically, very, very scientifically through a table of evidence, and they talk about mechanism and preclinical models and patient reports and trials and risks and costs and dosing. And they publish those online with their findings from a scientific perspective. Next slide, please. So this is what the completed reviews kind of look like. And you'll see that in each category, they're rating this alternative therapy. Well, they're scientists and they speak science, and these reviews are very science-y. So if you really want to understand and you're like, oh, I see insulin or I see ozone therapy, and I've always been wondering about that, If there's a little icon next to it that looks like that sound wave, that means that Dr. Bulat has submitted himself to 10 to 12 minutes of me asking him questions about that scientific review, and we've recorded it. And so those podcasts are really for people with lived experience who want to know the answers. Well, why did you say that? Or why do you think that? What does that mean? Will I feel that? How will I feel? What if I have the wrong dose? Like all of those kind of questions. If there's a little podcast symbol, you can click on it and hear the Q&A as well. Next slide. And how everybody can be involved is they review the things that the community asks them to review. So you can submit if you heard that eating broccoli on Tuesdays with extra butter and no pepper actually stops fasciculations. By all means, submit that. And if people vote on it, you can vote on anything you want. And they take the highest voted items, take them right off the top and start doing the scientific reviews and eventually the podcasts on those. Next slide, please. So in closing, you've heard a lot, I'm talking real fast, from Judi and I. We're very passionate about this. We get to work together every day and talk about these issues, but there are a few takeaways that we want everybody to keep in the top of your mind as you think about clinical research. The first being, everyone can be involved in research or support research in some capacity if they choose to. You don't have to choose to, but if you choose to, it doesn't have to be a hard stop no. Maybe there's a clinical trial you aren't eligible for, or maybe the EAP isn't in your area and that's a no, but there are a lot of yeses and ways that you can contribute to moving the research forward. The second is that the science and the patient communities are working together in partnership to create the most patient-centric approach to research as possible. I know it's scary, like it's scary to think about being in like a participant in research, but there is so much collaboration with the patient community and not just in North America, but as you'll see with the International Alliance globally, that the science community and the patient communities are working together and have the same goals. And the final thing, as you heard Judi say, is the bottom line is research is where the hope and the pathway forward live. We have to keep going with research to find the answers that we want. So in any way that you choose to participate, you're adding value, you're helping to find treatments and a cure, and you're very appreciated. Next slide, please, final slide. And I just want to close by saying, thank you. Thank you for listening to us talk about something that we're so very passionate about. And this quote really resonated to me, and I want you to take it away as well, that clinical research is a journey of curiosity, where every question leads to an answer and every answer uncovers new possibilities. We just keep going. There's no such thing as a negative trial. We always learn something that we take into the next step. So thank you for listening, and thank you for your participation, and happy to answer any questions.
Allison and Judi, thank you so much. What an awesome and extremely helpful presentation. We do have a couple questions. And this one has to do, I think you talked about it a little bit, but what about people who might have like that genetic connection to ALS or that familial connection to ALS? Where might they be able to, what might be the best resource for them to find studies?
I think I'll jump in, and Judi, you can answer if you will. It's like, I would definitely at this point suggest anybody with a genetic component to reach out to the End the Legacy organization or go to the End the Legacy website, because it is specific to their needs, and they will find not only the information about the research that's specific to them, but also the support that they may need as well.
I was going to say that as well. That's a great idea, Allison. But also, when I am not aware of any specific, I think it was C9, I don't know if it was a C9 trial question. At one point a few years ago, we had 3 C9 trials going on at the same time. I'm not aware of any specific C9 trials at this time, but again, using those resources such as the NEALS search engine or IMALS dashboard or ALS TDI, and always talking to your ALS care team too, to see what they know about any trials that are coming. Those would be my suggestions, as well as what Allison suggested.
Oh, perfect. And then what about timelines? We know like you said, and I think you did a great job explaining that clinical research, it takes a long time. Judi, I don't know if you can talk about this specifically, but do we know if or like when the results from Healey regimen F and G will be announced?
That's such a great question. I have not heard of when those results may be shared. They finished enrollment March, which was about a year for regimen F and under a year for regimen G, and that was a
Okay.
total of 540 people.
Wow, that's a lot of information to get through. Yeah.
Right. So they have to analyze it. Those folks all have to finish the 6-month placebo-controlled trial. They are looking at the data intermittently to make sure there's not anything that would be harmful to people. So that's not been something that's been discovered. So now they have to let the trial play out, and finish the 6-month part of it, and then people will roll into the open label. While they're in the open label, the data is analyzed from the placebo controlled, but then they add the open label data as well. So even though I did say research takes a long time, like I've heard 10 to 12 years, with the platform trial, it's been more like 4 to 5 years that they get some sort of an answer, not to FDA approval, but some sort of an answer on the trial. I think I'm going to forward that question, because I think it's a great question, to my friend Catherine Small, because the webinar for platform trial is tomorrow, right, Allison?
It is tonight.
It's tonight. Oh, it's Thursday.
It
Sorry.
is
Yep.
tonight. That's what I was going to say. And Dr. Paganoni will be on to be able to answer any questions directly. So you can register through the MGH site.
And that's a great question. I think another question, Anne Marie, because it goes hand in hand, is maybe when the next regimen is coming.
Mhm.
I'm just learning how to say the drug, because I, like Allison, just learned maybe what the next drug will be. It's kind of being worked out, but I don't know if it's even been, it's on our website. Allison, I don't know if you have access to the name of it, Monta something, but we don't have a timeline. We could say late fall. There's a lot of behind the scenes things that happen at the site level to get activated to start enrolling in the new regimen. That's the reality. Maybe late fall, early part of 2025. Another great question that Dr. Paganoni may have a better finger on the pulse on that one as well. But we are all eager to keep that trial going for sure.
Awesome. Yeah. And then what about people who may be excluded from studies, whether they're maybe slower in progression with their ALS, they've been living with ALS for a longer amount of time. Is there a way that they can advocate, or other ways that they might be able to get involved in research?
I can see Allison wants to answer this.
I'm so passionate about this. So for interventional trials, I've heard of 2 potential pathways that they're working on to include slow progressors. One obviously is the EAP with Act for ALS. EAP is being run as clinical research, where data is being collected and can be utilized to make decisions. That's new, and that is one area for slow progressors. The other I've heard about is rethinking trial design to have different arms or cohorts, one being fast progressing, one being slow progressing. So that's interventional trials. But I just want to say to all those slow progressors out there who are thinking, I can't be involved in research, you are so key to the observational studies and the data collection. We want to know why you're a slow progressor, so everybody can be a slow progressor. So please pick the yeses, those observational studies, those natural history studies. You are so important. So please do consider participating in those.
We just had another question come in kind of about exclusion criteria, which I think this is going to be different for every single study. And so I don't know offhand if a PEG tube would exclude you from specific trials.
Generally,
Mm.
a feeding tube does not
Right.
exclude you. Sometimes if the medication has to be taken by mouth,
I
it
could see
maybe
that.
can be mixed
Mhm.
with like applesauce. But you are right, Anne Marie, in that each criteria is specific. But I have seen trials that feeding tubes are okay as long as people can take the medications by mouth, or maybe the medication is an IV infusion,
Mhm.
and then they don't have to be able to swallow. So the team for the trial that you're interested in, first of all, usually that might be a criteria listed on clinical trials or the trial navigator. But if not, the trial team should definitely walk you through that type of a question and answer for you. The other thing too, back to the slow progressors, totally support what Allison said. Also, there are fewer, but there are some trials that disease duration is not a criteria.
Right.
It might be the ALS FRSR that's a
Mm.
criteria, and it has to be a certain number. But there are some trials that it isn't 24 months or 36 months, but there's not as many for sure. Thank you.
No, thank you guys. And I know there have been a couple questions about EAPs, but I think you guys did a great job of further explaining. Do you mind just reminding people what website they could go to learn more about EAPs?
We have a great website on Mass General that lays out like 4 different pages that lays out frequently asked questions, connects people to clinical trials to see the sites that are enrolling in the specific EAPs, and also provides a brochure with information about the specific EAPs for the ones that Mass General is leading, and that's Prodopidine and RAPA 501.
Mhm.
Um, and then also NEALS, Allison pointed out that NEALS also has a wonderful section to learn more about EAPs, and we often link you out to other great resources like the FDA. You might get linked out to the FDA to read about EAPs. Also, hopefully your team, wherever you get your care, they can speak to you about EAPs as well.
We probably have time for maybe one more question, which somebody had just dropped into the Q&A. Allison, thank you so much for highlighting the International Alliance of ALS MND associations. This person who's asking the question is wondering if they live in Canada, can they do a joint trial? And that I'm not so sure about, just given that oftentimes they want to make sure that the trial that you're participating in isn't impacting like another trial. So, but
So
please correct me.
residency is actually one of the eligibility requirements that a sponsor will set. So the sponsor may choose to do a trial in Europe, and then they are subject to the regulatory requirements in Europe. They may choose to do it in the United States, or they may choose to do it in Canada. Now, some trials will let people cross the borders and participate in the study, but it's a really good idea to talk to your local association before doing that, because that doesn't mean the drug will be available to you if it's approved, because perhaps it's only approved in the United States and can't be crossed borders over to Canada. So your provider may not ever be able to prescribe that for you. So there are a lot of intricacies in cross-border trial participation. In fact, MGH does have some resources on their site of things to consider if you're considering participating in a trial in another country.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. All right, everyone. I just want to thank you so much for your participation today. I also, let's see if I can share my screen one more time for you all and jump to our last slide because I want to show you what is coming up in August. Oh boy, there we go. Coming in August, Thursday, August 29th, we have Dr. Maida from Johns Hopkins and Dr. Makowski from Compassionate Care ALS, who are going to be talking about how to empower your voice, navigating conversations with your ALS care team. The registration link should be on our website again within the next day or two, so please stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, thank you all so much for your time this afternoon. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you, Allison. Thank you, Judi. I hope everybody stays well, and we'll see you in August.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.